The other big news this week is the crisis generated by the left and the open borders lobby concerning the so-called separation of children from their illegal alien parents who have crossed the border illegally, are detained under the law, and that's what happens. You get arrested, you lose custody of your children, or your children are taken up by the government or another responsible party. And in this case, the children are here also illegally, and the government under the Trump administration was taking them into custody, kind of like the Obama administration had to do. So what the left had been doing, you may recall a few months ago, you saw news about this migration train of people coming up from Central America through Mexico, families and all of that. Well, part two of that was to generate this crisis that the Trump administration was doing something improper or inappropriate in finally enforcing the law fully. What was going on is that family units, and there weren't many times family units at all, but children who were being smuggled by adults they didn't know, what was going on is that the family units would cross the border, show up at the border, and they were just let free, which is effectively amnesty, and it isn't what the law is. And to the degree they were detained, the children were separated out, even by the Obama administration. To the degree they could be kept together, they were, until the Obama administration happily signed on to a consent decree as caused by a lawsuit filed by the left in California that prohibited them from keeping children with their families detained for longer, I think, than 20 days. So we've always had this simmering crisis at the border, which makes the security and securing the border urgent, that children are coming into the border area, either unaccompanied or accompanying with traffickers, or they're here with their parents illegally, and their parents cross the border illegally, and they've got to be detained. And so the conundrum is, what do you do with the children? And it's a nightmare situation. I don't envy the government trying to figure out what to do. Judicial Watch has been highlighting this issue for 4 or 5 years. We know the Obama administration secretly converted a hangar in Fort Bliss, Texas, to house these families and these children. The Border Patrol, we knew, was complaining that they were being asked to babysit all these children during the Obama administration, and it was a nightmare scenario. And now the Trump administration is trying to deal with the symptoms of the out-of-control open border and trying to enforce the law, which is what Americans want them to do. There's a new poll out. 40% of Americans want the families detained. Not released, detained. 20% of Americans want the parents detained and the children out. So that's 64% of Americans want these families held accountable to the rule of law. Now, what is the alternative? Amnesty. You get here, you get released, especially if you have a child. What a perverse incentive that would be to illegal aliens to come here in greater numbers. And of course, that's what the left wants. They want open borders. There are many Republicans who want open borders as well. Now, there's a legislative solution here to bypass some of the legal problems they have in keeping the children with their parents. Congress can pass a law mandating that the children and parents stay together while their cases are adjudicated. Now, the big lie here is that there's a valid claim of asylum on the part of many of the parents, or so-called parents, who are coming in and claiming asylum in the interior of the United States after having crossed illegally. They don't have valid claims of asylum by and large. They may under the crazy interpretation, lawless interpretation of the Obama administration, but asylum is designed to, if you go home and you'll be arrested by your government because of your political beliefs or something like that, that's what asylum is designed to protect you for or from. But But the idea that because there's too much crime, gangs and violence in your home country, that's the basis for asylum is absurd. It's not the law. So the left has encouraged this abuse of the law, and the result is this massive trafficking operation. There are few people who enter the border illegally who aren't doing it with the assistance of these cartels that engage in human and drug trafficking. So people talk about a migration issue or illegal immigration. This is a human trafficking crisis on our border caused by the lack of security at the border, sanctuary policies that encourage people to reside here illegally once they cross the border, and Congress being two-faced on the issue, saying that they keep on promoting and pushing out the idea of amnesty while refusing to help the administration enforce the law in the books. Now, I kind of have an old-fashioned approach to this. I think the best immigration reform is to enforce the law in the books, enforce the rule of law. And if the border is out of control, as I suspect it is, until we, I think, a wall is appropriate, but we should deploy the military to the border. Let the civilian agencies continue to provide and take in and deal with administratively and legally the aliens that cross the border illegally, but have the military secure the border so the ability to cross is severely curtailed. I think that's what we have a military for. There's a crisis, there's a national security crisis, there's a drug crisis, and a human trafficking crisis on our border. We have our military deployed all over the country, all over the world, and I'm sure there would be many in the military who would be happy to be deployed here in the home front to defend our borders in the south. And yeah, in the north if necessary. That's the way to deal with the crisis, because as long as the border is open, we're going to have all of these children and their families come in through the southern border. We're creating this humanitarian nightmare that the government doesn't really know how to deal with adequately. So there is a solution. President Trump should stick by his guns, uphold the rule of law, enforce the rule of law. Do not encourage more illegal immigration by suggesting that if you get here, you will go free. That's the key point. So Judicial Watch is very much involved in this debate. Our team was just at the border a few weeks ago. We were dealing with a rancher down who has a ranch on the border. I think he has 10 miles abutting the border. 50,000 people a year cross his property. Can't leave his home at night. They can't leave their home during the day without being armed, he and his wife. Dead bodies all over his property, regularly found. That's the reality of the border. American citizens held hostage in their own homes because of the failure of our government to secure the border. And Judicial Watch is trying to take on the sanctuary policy issue, because you can have a border, a wall 100 feet high, but if they know that if they get over the wall or around it or under it somehow, they'll be free and clear in sanctuary cities, that wall won't be as effective as it could be. So that's why Judicial Watch is trying to uphold the rule of law by suing sanctuary cities. We've done it in the past. We're doing it currently in San Francisco. We have a taxpayer lawsuit against the city of San Francisco over its deadly, it's the Sheriff's Department's sanctuary policy specifically, over that deadly policy that releases criminals onto the streets who are illegal aliens and who should be referred to ICE and potentially deported. And it's that sort of outrageous policy that puts Americans at risk, kills people like Kate Steinle, the young woman famously killed by an illegal alien who was released under the sanctuary policy. We just have to sue and stop them.